This video is brought to you with the help of my Patreon supporters. By pledging a certain amount, you will be credited during the beginning and end of certain videos. Today's supporter is Jacob Ward. Funny, I'm already friends with a guy named Cody Ward. Nah, I'm sure it's a coincidence. Hello and welcome to the Smartest Moron, where, well, at least technically speaking, this game is better. Just, not by much. Shin Megami Tensei 2 is boring, and I'm not sure how else I can break this to you guys. Now, at least this game didn't make me horribly depressed. It may not have seemed like it, but reviewing Shin Megami Tensei 1 broke me while enduring the pandemic, as did the designs that felt ancient and broken. The sequel does make a number of improvements I will soon get into, yet for every bit of praise I can give this game, it finds a way for me to be bored out of my mind. I'm so thankful I covered the PS2 SMT games, otherwise I think people would assume I hated the series when I clearly don't. Suddenly reviewing the Persona games looks appealing. I really hope If is good. Now some of you might be thinking that being bored is worse than being stressed out. But here's my counter-argument. 2020. I will take the boredom. Anyway, this game was never released in North America. Aeon-Genesis, who also did a patch for the last game, patched this one too in 2004. There's also a mobile game taking place between both titles, but I won't be examining that since, well, phone game, and I really don't have the energy to do so. And that's about all the information I have, so let's just dive into this review of Shin Megami Tensei 2 as I want to finish this ASAP. If you don't start the game off right away, you do get an explanation as to what happened after the first game. For those who need a refresher, the world was kinda destroyed from the war between demons representing law and chaos, with disasters like nuclear missiles and a flood ruining the world. So the side of law erected a church beforehand to welcome God, with the chaos side breaking in to save their own skin. Afterwards, the hero of neutrality, Kazuya, ended up defeating both sides and prevented the rise of Lucifer and God. However, as a new home was erected for humanity, the law side seemed to gain an upper hand, helping to rebuild society with a dominant force called the Center. Anyway, the protagonist for our journey is referred to as Hawk for now, who is being grilled by this dude, Akamoto, to train and get ready for a title match. He gives some clumsy exposition with how he found Aleph drunk, amnesiac, and fighting off a demon despite all of that. The fight he's taking part in is important since the winner will be granted citizenship within the center, and it'll help boost the popularity of Akamoto, who has such terrible debt, no one will sell weapons or armor to you, even if you have the cash. Seems weird to turn away money, but their loss. We can get a good feel for the gameplay here as it's quite similar to the first. There are still a few things to note, like the virtual reality simulators. Here, Aleph can fight demons and even choose tiers to further level up. These I never bothered using that much. Unlike with random battles outside, they will not provide rewards beyond experience. I got on just fine with fighting regular enemies on the world map. The only purpose to really going to these is to meet our good friend Steven. At certain points in the story, he can grant you upgrades to your demon summoning program. For the most part, Steven doesn't do much in this game either until the end of the game, and mostly acts as a convenient plot tool. The other reason I don't use those things is because, well, magnetite is still a thing. However, you don't lose anyone on the world map anymore, which is good as enemies dropped a lot of magnetite early on. Some enemies still don't drop this stuff, but thanks to being able to grind outside, magnetite isn't as much of a concern as before. The only exception is when being stuck inside, where I really have to question the level design sometimes, as the maps are annoyingly intricate, sometimes for no reason when no demons occupy the zone, forcing you to unsummon your own, though I still need to cover the real problem later on. One major positive I will grant is the left shoulder button now activates the map. It's much easier to keep track of yourself too, even while in dark zones, which are dark for a change, so I don't have to go through two menus to get to it anymore. Still need magic for a mini-map though. There's also this little bar here that changes color in the middle of the screen, and it will inform you if demons are around as it gets brighter. It's very handy when you don't want to waste magnetite and can help when preparing for a fight. Now you might be wondering, are Bufo and Zio spells still broken? Or in this case, Zio is called Geo for some reason. They kinda still are, especially later in the game. And yes, bosses seem to remember the BS from the last game, and some spam those spells quite often. While this sounds dangerous, well, magic is kinda worthless. I only say kinda because enemies still have resistances and whatnot, and say running into this elephant does me no favors if I only have guns and swords, but apart from those few enemies and a boss or two, this game really prefers physical fighters over everything else, as magic output sucks. There are even times my physical damage would rise for no real reason, not even from critical damage either. Later on, there are bullets for guns to simulate a shock effect, making spells even more worthless than before. Though remember the alignment, your equipment is still affected by this, which for some reason includes bullets as well.
Stupid Yakuza. That gun was a relic made by demon kind. You're too soft-hearted to use its dark magic now.
How about this random axe I found from the corpse of your friends?
How many did you kill?
Enough.
I
can give you a head start if you want.
Thank you!
Magic also lacks the speed advantage from the last game, so spellcasters really need agility to be somewhat useful. There's also gambling in this game, and while you can get useful gear, it took too long for me to even see a tiny benefit. You know, there's some kind of message here about deformed humans continuing to waste their lives with this crap, but I doubt that was intentional, mainly since these humans still have perfect skin, just like everywhere else. Demons can now have up to 6 skills, and it's also very helpful in this game, adding some more variety and purpose to them. Remember the extra command from the last game and my complaints how skills were chosen at random? No longer the case. If I want to breathe hot fire or sing a lullaby, I can now order a demon to just do it. Hawk still can't use magic though, and it makes me wonder why he doesn't have skills like the demons. Buffs are still great to use, though I have to recommend finding someone who knows Tsukukaja, since bosses later on not only have a ton of health, they can dodge around your attacks super easily. Extra attacks seem to bypass this accuracy issue, though they will take away a certain percentage of HP. Much like the last game, you'll need to figure out skills and equipment on your own. There is some help though with the appraisers who can, for a price, tell you what certain things do. I guess because Hawk can't just write things down. Thank God for GameFAQs continuing to be helpful. Fusions also help in giving more demon skills, though it's a system I barely noticed. One interesting thing I did discover was how you can recruit human enemies. By doing so, you create random fusions, and depending on the strength of the demons used, you can create high-level demons, which bypass the player's level cap and can be summoned with no issue beyond the usual magnetite and money cost. This basically broke the game for me, as I could get my hands on beings such as Camille, who had a ton of HP and hit like a truck early into the game. They aren't easy to get at times, but the results tend to be worth it early on. One extra skill I want to draw attention to is Divine Intervention. It costs 80 MP and will remove a quarter of a foe's health, including bosses. Considering how some bosses have over 10,000 hit points, this is a godsend and practically necessary, as those same bosses are hard to hit. In order to properly use it though, you need to consider the alignment. For example, I had an Angel of Law with the skill, and it's effective on chaos and neutral enemies only. This made a demon like Anubis ideal since I was aiming for a neutral run, so he could hit both sides, even if his MP was a bit lacking. What's funny is I hated constantly getting this demon in Persona. Now he's my lifesaver. Though sorry Egyptian Doggo of Death, I have way too many figures at the moment, so I can't honor you. Then again, the only figure I could find online are... Gotta admit, I like beefy Anubis. I may get this later for myself if I'm rich. And throughout the game, Hawk will experience flashbacks to a lab with an old man stating the names of certain individuals. Unlike with the last game, not all of these guys will be party members, and they can be named for you, though I recommend just naming them for yourself if you care about your alignment. See, if you decide to be lazy with this, you shift your alignment from neutral to law, and by quite a hefty amount too. It's certainly possible to get back to neutral easily enough by using certain healing centers, and the alignment isn't quite so bad here thanks to the factors changing it being reduced. The problem here is how summoning functions like in the last game, or if you are on law, you can't summon chaos demons, which limits your loadout. And this early in the game, it's quite an annoying handicap. This was a complaint at first for me, but in hindsight, how the alignment shifted in response to my laziness and unwillingness to think for myself is interesting, and it was completely avoidable, so I'll give it a pass here. Eventually, after winning against Red Bear, Hawk is coerced by a woman named Hiriko to find a child, and they go to one of the heads of Valhalla, Madam. She wants their help to find someone who plans on opening the abyss to flood this world with demons. Presumably worse than the garden variety here. We never get to know too much about her, but according to the Wikia, which I assume accounts for any remakes of Game 2, she worked with Kazuya to help establish Valhalla, which is why she has Cerberus from the last game as a guardian. I kinda wish Cerberus had more speaking lines in this game, but more on him in the spoiler section. What happened to Futsugo? Kazuya's main love interest?
There's a simple explanation for that.
Yeah, it's never explained unless maybe Futsugo was the madam herself. I wish I could say Beth and Hiriko were improvements, but only barely with the latter. The former, we'll come back to that. Eventually, after silencing the madman's demon abomination, who also killed him because what else did you expect when working with demons beyond your power, Hawks is brought into the center, where Hiroko is switched out for Beth and his real name is Aleph. Turns out he originally belonged to the center and was lost in an accident. Making his champion just made it super easy to find him. I feel like Red Bear deserves a second chance, but I kinda killed the crap out of him. Sorry bro. From here, it's a slow build to understand how the center works, the kind of stuff the Chaos side is up to, and how things fall apart, as they do. Though because of the subject matter, I can't really spoil too much. It's also because the story is stretched out with long periods of nothing important happening. And this is where I can mention the other problem with the inside of dungeons. On top of being annoying to navigate, you have to go through them repeatedly. Let's take this mission where Beth and Aleph have to defeat King Frost and Basilisk, both of whom will have taken over Holy Town and a church with their ice and poison combo respectively. The Basilisk needs to be found on the world map and will constantly flee from encounters. Maybe poison Aleph for good measure. He doesn't seem to show up randomly, as I found specific spots he automatically pops up in. The problem is when he finally decides to fight, that part is random. According to a guide I saw in some videos, he appeared and stayed for a boss fight after a few run-ins. For some bizarre reason, it took me an hour for it to finally get ready to throw down. Curing the poison felt pointless due to how it would immediately poison me again. Couple that with random demons ready to kick my ass and poison lowering your damage output, this was incredibly tedious. So how does this relate to the dungeons being annoying? Because I had to go back and forth between an area connecting the center and Holy Town constantly. Game 1 would have just put a terminal to reduce travel time. This game shoves any convenience until maybe about halfway through the game, possibly near the end. See, there was also a teleportation spell I often used in Game 1 to save time, and Hiroko doesn't gain it until later on, putting a major dent in travel plans. Couple this with backtracking to find certain items or characters needed to advance the story, and this is easily the worst part of the game, and it only helps to make the story feel like it's stretched out unnecessarily, hurting the pacing of the plot too. The damage gets worse as the dialogue can often be slow rather than fast and instant like in the last game, leading to the game itself feeling even slower. With all of this stuff, the game taking over 40 hours to finish suddenly makes sense. It's at the worst when dealing with deaths as they slowly speak, eating up precious time. And yes, this does it during a boss rush too. I know Shin Megami Tensei games are often seen as torturous, but holy mother of God! This is made slightly worse as some of these early dungeons throw some angel demons that are kinda high level. In some cases, I couldn't even escape, like with the archangels in the prison area, though I did get lucky and get a damn good weapon for law users aiding me in future boss fights. This only happens early on though, and the encounters are mostly fair after this point. One stupid thing though is having bonus dungeons after the game where there are no extra bosses. It's just getting more gear to fight the final boss again with no real changes. Overall, despite all of the improvements to make a better game, everything feels slower and more boring as a result. It's only because of the more unique story elements can I recommend checking out this story, as well as the overall message I got from playing it. Sometimes, the plot is done decently, like working your way up to the tournament and activities with the center helping to flesh out the world. Other times, well, let's examine some more spoilers to see how this plot went wrong with its pacing. Let's get a few more examples of padding out of the way. After saving Hiroko from being stuck in a prison for bullcrap reasons because the center is filled with dickheads, she and Aleph try to return to Valhalla. However, it's gone, with nothing but a void left. Zayn comes in and explains how it was destroyed, swallowed by the demon Abaddon, all according to the plan of the center. Much like the flood in the last game, only the chosen, only the worthy will be allowed to enter their paradise. As Zayn rushes off to fight the center in his own way, Aleph and Hiroko meet up with Cerberus, who explains how he rushed into the safe zone and barely made it. He sadly goes over the fate of the madam, to whom he was indebted to, and even begs Aleph to let him join as a minion. Honestly, he's the only character so far that I gave two craps about, especially when apparently this is Pascal from the last game. I can't even bear to use him as fusion fodder. Look, anyone who harms a hair on this doggo will pay 1,000 freaking deaths. You wanna know what I'll do to you? I'll force you to go through every Super Nintendo Shin Megami Tensei title until you get every single ending. No Retron 5, none of that bullshit. You're doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm that twisted. Anyway, the goal now is to go through this underworld, eventually finding settlements where demons and humans are working together. So the flood from the last game kinda sorta got fixed, as familiar locations in Japan are accessible again, though the damage has been done, leaving mostly a desert and broken buildings. What could have worked as a great setup to help establish the world more turns into meaningless quests with no real impact to them. Remember Beth? Well, during one mission, someone calling themselves the Messiah and Aleph a fake one appeared. This is Daleth, who nearly killed Aleph until Beth jumped in, sacrificing herself. Her dying wish was for Aleph to spare him, and throughout the game, he tries to kill Aleph for the humiliation he suffered that day. Well, instead of another fight, he decides to team up with a demon called Puck, who uses Infidelity Sap on Aleph. It lands on Hiriko instead, and she is suddenly... well, I think you can put 2 and 2 together based on this dialogue. It freaks out Aleph so much he runs away from her, and Puck flees too, likely realizing Aleph wants to strangle him. A demon woman named Hanon is there, and explains how the plan was meant for Aleph to fall in love with her, but she is in love with Daleth. And, well, this entire situation kinda happened. After meeting Oberon, who was surprisingly chill compared to other games like Raito Kusunoha 2, he tells Aleph to find Puck, and in a dungeon that's just... awful. Now, there are no enemies, but each and every time, you will repeat the exact same conversation with Puck if you find him. This happens on certain panels, certain ones you cannot avoid. So if you say, screw up and get lost, you gotta repeat those conversations again. And each time, he'll inflict another status effect or damage you through the slow dialogue. So, for the love of God, don't have any demons out, or you're paying for their healthcare in addition to the regular Magnetite salary. After finding Puck and mugging him for some extra cash, because I'm not exactly in a pleasant mood right now, we go back to Oberon, who broke the spell apparently, and Hiriko freaks out what Daleth did, thinking he was a perv. Hanon then uses the sap on Daleth, so now he's in love with her, and yeah, I think I don't need to explain how rapey this situation feels. Now, granted, I went back and they seem to be happy with one another, and Daleth seems to have a mind of his own given that he appears later in the game, but manipulating someone's feelings like this feels very wrong, and it's not like using a charm spell in a fight. This has the potential to lead to rape, and it seemed Daleth would have been just fine if Aleph spent an eternity doing stuff to Hanon earlier. And ignoring the bad taste in the joke considering the times we live in and everything, what did this accomplish for anyone? I remind you, Daleth killed a major character early on, one who really cared for Aleph. And that's about all I can say about Beth's personality. I get the impression Daleth wasn't meant to be some bad guy, and having this town and even a demon who loves him would have been a good way to know the character more. Plus, Aleph was aligned with the Center, who are the bad guys, so some kind of justification for this attitude could be made. But the implications of what this joke led to only makes him look horrible, and if you ignore that, it just makes him look like an incompetent fool unworthy of being a rival to Aleph. It feels like it exists purely to pad out the plot of the game. Then there's hunting down the body parts of Masekatos to resurrect him. Some parts can be easy to find, but this requires a huge amount of backtracking and can take hours. Then you have to go back to Hiriko, this troll-looking guy, not to be confused with the Hiroko girl, who tells you to go to the fusion lab, and you have to go somewhere else since Roppongi, for some bizarre reason, lacks such a place. And Roppongi isn't exactly small either, so I'm losing more Magnetite, running into more annoying fights, and wasting my time. Then I do the fusion, and have to return all the way back to Hiriko, only to have to travel to yet another area. A lot of this traveling in RPGs is usually cut down with the player being transported around or making levels smaller so you literally aren't spending hours going from one place to the next. If I wanted this level of tedium, I would return to Final Fantasy XIV! Let me put my complaints in another way. There are mutants in Roppongi, their bodies twisted from the nuclear missiles and all the damage done to the world. They just want to see the sun one more time. Guess how important they are to the plot. And finally, there was finding all the pillars to move on to the story. Now, you are technically given some of these throughout the game and just gotta hunt down the rest. One of the requirements? Winning a disco contest. I am dead serious. So, with the disco contest and the disco ball of doom that is the one of the bosses in Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, are we responsible for these? The reason this is frustrating is with regards to your stats. You need 10 points in magic for Aleph to win. Let me repeat that. You need 10 points in a stat that's completely worthless to Aleph in order to win a plot-essential item. Not intelligence, which actually boosts your magic defense, not agility, which would actually help you avoid attacks and run away from fights, magic. And before anyone keeps defending this, since boosting stats does occasionally give a minor boost in something else, that's the issue. Maybe you get the chance to boost another attribute. Let's see, I can pump my intelligence, raising my magical defense, which in turn boosts my agility on occasion and improves talks with demons, or I can pump magic, where Aleph's magical attack, which he can never use, will be increased, and maybe I'll get an additional point in magic defense. Do you see why this is stupid? Now, you can gain gear to boost magic and even order a drink at the bar, but this requires timing, and even then, you still need more levels. And again, the game doesn't warn you unless you try to win the contest. So if you're like me and ignored the stat, this means extra grinding just to get one stupid item to advance the plot. And around this time, I didn't exactly have a lot of enemies I could grind on either, especially with my level being so high. So, were there any characters I was interested in? Well, kinda. If I had to list my favorites, it would boil down to Zayn and Lucifer. Zayn is a soldier of the center, similar to Aleph as he was created to help protect him and follow orders. During an attempt to save Hiriko, he stops Aleph and says how the rules of the center must be maintained. It's only after his defeat, after seeing how hard Aleph was fighting for the life of another, does he realize how wrong he is, and that maybe the center's rules could use some changing. However, remember Valhalla? It's all gone with nothing but a void there, swallowed by the demon known as Abaddon. Broken and enraged by this, Zayn goes on a crusade against the center, taking over the TV station to expose their crimes, and tries to free the workers being forced to do their jobs by the singing of a sad siren. There's not too much to dig into his personality with these actions, just a man who changes his ways after seeing their atrocity firsthand. He's even noble to an extent, not just with Aleph, but with how the center calls for him to turn himself in, or they will cut off oxygen in the holy town, killing more people. Each time though, he's kinda left incapacitated, trying to save the workers enthralled by the sad cries of a siren held against her will, beaten by a demon who sits on a toilet, and no, I'm not joking, Persona 5 fans will definitely recognize this bastard. Turning himself in to save people? He's frozen in carbonite without us seeing him telling off the crazed angels. Speaking of which, this brings me up to one of my favorite moments in the game. Raphael, Uriel, and Michael went mad with power, and together with the god they created, try to defeat Aleph and fail. Gabriel is the only sane of the bunch, and even helps Aleph before the fight with the fake god. And yeah, about this moment, it's interesting because the game will constantly say how humans need someone to rely on, someone to cling to. Yet the same thing can be said of the angels. Gabriel eventually reveals how this happened, and who Aleph really is, minus a few certain other details. As the center tried to establish itself in the Millennium Kingdom, they needed a messiah to help lead them. Years and years passed by, and none would come, leaving the angels frustrated. So they decided to embrace the power of science and create humans with accelerated growth cycles, each one serving a different role. Aleph himself was meant to be the messiah. Beth was meant to be his partner. Didn't exactly work out so well, and good to know sexism is still alive and well here. Daleth was meant to be the anti-messiah and die to Aleph, all to boost Aleph's popularity. Again, didn't quite work out, though Aleph did win their fight. Zayn was meant to be Aleph's protector and served another role. More on that later though. So where does that leave Hiriko? Well, it's eventually revealed later on that Gabriel didn't reveal the whole story. One of the scientists Aleph was meant to find is revealed to be alive at the moment in the stomach of Abaddon. He was the one to help Aleph try to rescue Hiriko and tell them the truth about everything, but couldn't because, well, stuck in the belly of the beast. He was involved in creating Aleph and the others by having his daughter involved as the mother. So yeah, remember how Hiriko sought out Aleph's help in trying to find a child fleeing the center? Aleph was that child. She gave birth to him, and he had an accelerated growth rate. Guys, at this point, I'm just thankful that, with the whole infidelity sap thing, that it didn't turn into a Yuri and Karen thing from Shadowheart's Covenant. Back to Zayn, he eventually falls back to the side of law, showing his way of thinking hadn't completely changed from the center's. He seemed to value life to an extent, as he was willing to fight Aleph and only backed off when he fought so hard. It wouldn't be surprising if Zayn's instinct to protect Aleph kicked in at that very moment. He works with Gabriel to try and establish the true Millennium Kingdom. This involves gathering people into an arc of sorts and getting off the planet. And no, I'm not kidding there. The very top of the pyramid detaches to help escort them to safety from the Megiddo arc, which will wipe out all life on the planet. Well, I suppose after nuclear missiles and floods, the escalation of the threat had to be up to Dr. Evil levels of villainy. So why is Zayn really good with all this? Turns out he wasn't just Aleph's guardian, he's Satan. In the SMT universe, Satan and Lucifer are separate beings. By fusing with the dragon Set, Zayn will achieve his true form and work with God, becoming a judge and punishing others. Now, in the neutral path, there isn't much revealed about his character, so sadly I didn't get to experience his thought process until the very end of the game. He just seems to accept this role, and as time went on, he grew to be less interesting. The only thing left for his character is on the law path, where he will actually betray God and help Aleph destroy him, even if it meant the end of his own life. Yeah, as God welcomes the three of them, Zayn is ready to throw down with God moments after destroying the world. As Satan, Zayn will bring justice to the man who destroyed the world. After Zayn helped in firing the laser, Law is just full of hypocritical assholes, isn't it? He was just going on about how there were too many sacrifices and just blows up the damn planet like nothing. Gabriel also loses her purpose and just gives up. I make note of this since Gabriel kinda does nothing else in the plot after the plot twist with the other archangels, especially in other routes. Not even acting as a meat shield for God. I would play the game again, but I'm unwilling to go through that tedium. I swear to you now though, if I manage to record the 3DS games, I will not skip out on the endings there. Unless there is a canonical one, which even then, few and far between. Mainly because those games are actually fun and don't make me contemplate tasing myself for a joke. Also, I can't afford a taser. And now Lucifer. Throughout the entire series of SMT, I have known Lucifer to only be a manipulative bastard, constantly testing those he shows interest in by making their life hell, whether it be forcing a child to endure the end of the world, to letting those wreak havoc in Tokyo in his name, or setting fiends on a devil summoner and helping another guy unleash killer bugs on the capital. Lucifer isn't a friend to mankind. If he is, it's usually to help clean a mess he caused, and even then, he's just trying to sway someone to his line of thinking. Calling Lucifer a hero is something I flat out refuse to do. Mainly because, well, in the words of a certain comic book reviewer,
he's the devil! He's all about finding loopholes in deals you make with him! You cannot trust him because he's the devil!
However, this might be the one game to make me think Lucifer wasn't that bad. Oh, don't get me wrong, he tries to get Aleph killed on multiple occasions using his demon servants, believing he was Satan only to realize that wasn't the case. The moment he realizes the truth, he tries to buddy up to the Messiah, offering his aid in destroying God once and for all. Nothing new or surprising about that, until you start to understand why he's doing this. To protect his people in the Abyss. The center is the only target of his destruction, and while there are many people calling the Crossfire, the body count is noticeably lower than, well, the entire frigging planet. Hell, he tries to avoid that in the Chaos route. Even his dialogue paints him as more heroic and concerned about everything, which made me wonder if having his own kingdom, having his own subjects probably softened him up. A lot of time did pass, so we get to see a side of Lucifer I never thought we would see. Even the ending itself doesn't make me think something horrible is about to happen. He succeeds, dozens of the demon world congratulate you, and things seem relatively good. Even Daleth finally calmed his tits and is congratulating you. Thus, the downsides to Chaos, apart from maybe some demons being unable to be controlled, are much lessened in my eyes. Even in the underworld, demons were able to form societies and get along with humans and mutants. Even as he died on the neutral path, Lucifer told Aleph about everything, including how God wanted him to cause worldwide destruction by summoning the dragon Kazuryu, and he feared it would destroy the Abyss too. Regardless of the paths, it was his backup plan in case of his death as sort of a weapon to use against God. But he could have easily kept his mouth shut about everything, including the Megiddo arc. It was the one time in any SMT game I actually felt sympathy for Lucifer and kinda wanted to join his side, something I never thought I would say. Of course, I'm still a tad skeptical since he could have just easily wanted God to lose as well, and his claim about not wanting innocents to die is kinda bullcrap when he wanted to attack Millennium and harm a bunch of people who did nothing wrong. Well, as far as I know anyway. Plus, he only seemed like the best and most interesting option since neutrality feels so lifeless. No good dialogue between enemies or anything, no bonding with friends you made along the way, or any of the demons. Nothing. Also, all endings feature a slow as hell replay of scenes in reverse that feels like an eternity to get through. I complained about the mutants serving no real purpose besides background lore, yet the Chaos ending has them benefiting from everything and seeing the sun, showing them happy. The best we get in neutral is Hiriko stating how both she and Aleph have to rely on each other now, and no, thankfully not in a creepy Shadow Hearts Covenant way. Now, there's one more topic I wanted to bring up. God and the conception of demons. Beings such as Beelzebub have stated they can always be brought back, and Aleph himself proves that right thanks to demon fusions. or the angels can keep coming right back after being slain by Kazuya. The first game even stated how the cycle of reincarnation meant some humans could never truly escape the cycle. Throughout the game, these higher beings often state how humans can't live without relying on someone, which is why some were okay buying the bullshit the law side spewed. It's even possible for them to just want someone to lead them and not really think much about it. For example, Gimmel, who was maybe brought up once, was another being at the lab apparently and oversaw the development of Arcadia, as well as trapping people to serve God. When the people are freed, it's possible for Aleph to have them all worship him instead. Ignore this and they are pathetic messes unable to live without a master, and would thus need recovery and time to fix themselves. Stuff that Aleph doesn't actually does, he just pieces out, especially since it's just a side quest. Now, some people probably think God is always the true threat of this series, when in reality he isn't, and the creators have spoken against this idea. In reality, he's step 1 on the big list of reformation. Really, the problem boils down to humanity itself. Because there's always a need to turn to someone to solve their issues, they became devoted, fanatically so despite all reason, just to save their own hide. And who knows, maybe they start to actually buy the bullcrap. Or maybe they're just stupid, can't always rule out that option, especially these days. Screw it, we've gone so long without one, it just feels wrong. The knowledge gained here will definitely be handy in analyzing other SMT titles, though it also shows humanity isn't the only problem. Of course, the demons and angels are always going a rank higher since, well, let's face it, we kinda have to survive in a war between them. And even then, we saw angels themselves able to create their own god just to create their own ideal paradise. The chaos ending is as strong as the example with the angels, with how many more characters are there in praising Lucifer and Aleph, demonstrating how the need to rely on others remain as strong as ever with them. So the cycle may just continue in one way or another, especially since Lucifer can't always control his underlings, like Astaroth attacking Aleph for example. So why are these a problem? Because the message I gained from this series is similar to how I view superheroes. Aleph and beings like him are meant to inspire people. While yes, this game kinda fails at living up to the message, say for maybe Zan, and even then he goes in a radically different direction, it's still a message I kinda feel here, just not fully addressed. Humanity needs to change for the better, needs a role model, and they need to be shown how much strength a single person has. And not just through bashing in a demon's skull like Aleph and Kazuya did. Steven, while not having much of a character in these two titles, makes up for it by serving as the pinnacle of mankind's intelligence, by not just being the same age all this time, so clearly he's discovered some kind of secret to immortality or something, but by creating the demon summoning app in the first place. Demons themselves could be argued as extensions of humanity too, similar to how personas are thought of in the same way. The downside is that in this game, the neutral ending doesn't seem to pass on this memo, so people are more likely to flock to Lucifer. Hell, I nearly flocked to Lucifer. This is something Game 4 did better in, but that's the other issue with talking about SMT2. I'm better off using the lore this game helped produce to talk about the other titles. But what do you think of these thoughts? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and while I have your attention, be sure to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed my ramblings. Maybe even support my Patreon to help me grab a 3DS capture card to look at other SMT titles. Or maybe even help me out on Twitter by following me there and retweeting my content. For now, I'm going to end things here. The next SMT title we'll be looking at is If, but for now, I really need a break. We've seen how angry of a man-child God can act. Now let's see what happens when God is one of us. I'm the smartest moron, and thank you for watching.